not really a good sign when your horror comedy has got Leslie Nielsen and Mel Brooks, and yet the comedy MVP of the entire film is that guy from Ghostbusters 2. Hey everyone, it's me, Aaron.
I'm Michelle.
And this is our post-Shriek out reaction for Dracula, Dead and Loving It, because we are almost at the end of Horror Comedy Week. And I have been wanting to return to this one because I loved this movie when I was a kid. This is one of those movies that when I was a kid, I watched it all the time because it was another one of those films that just reran on television over and over and over again.
And it's like, usually when people think of like Mel Brooks horror comedy, they think of Young Frankenstein.
Which I always looked at this and just thought, okay, well, this is supposed to be like the spiritual successor to that because he did Frankenstein, now he's going to do Dracula. But it was also Bram Stoker's Dracula was huge at this time, so he wanted to come in there and do a parody of that. Which there are several times in here where they come in here and just go, yeah, this is Bram Stoker's Dracula. Like they have Leslie Nielsen wear like the big butt wig, which, yeah, you should parody that because that was kind of weird. But yeah, this is a film that I absolutely loved when I was a kid. I kept thinking to myself, does this hold up? Because yes, it's Mel Brooks, and yes, it's Leslie Nielsen, but it's older Mel Brooks, and it's older Leslie Nielsen, and they're two guys who later on in their careers, I mean, it's not like they stopped being funny, but you know, this isn't Naked Gun, this isn't Blazing Saddles, this isn't Young Frankenstein, this isn't Airplane. This is one of their later things, and I will say, it is still funny. But it definitely does not hold up as well as I remember it. However, it didn't get good reviews when it came out, so I will gladly admit it's also possibly that I was just a kid. It's probably this thing didn't have anything to hold up in the first place. It's just, I was a kid, I thought the stuff in here was funny. When you get older, it's like, oh, I guess that really isn't that funny anymore. But yeah, there's nothing really to talk about with the story in here. Because this is 100% just Bram Stoker's Dracula. And it's honestly weird how much this syncs up with the story of Dracula. I was watching Cinemassacre. They did, I think last year, a video about the most accurate version of Dracula. Not which is the best Dracula movie, but which Dracula movie stays true to the book the most. And it was actually kind of fascinating because he went through all these points of like story elements, all these points of like character descriptions, the different characters in the film, the different abilities that Dracula has, all these different things to match up with him. And it was weird after watching that film and then watching this one, and I thought to myself, this actually kind of deserved to be on this list somewhere. Because this one actually has more stuff from Bram Stoker's Dracula, which granted is because they were parodying Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is one of the more accurate depictions of the actual book. But this actually has more stuff in it from the Dracula book than a lot of other incarnations of the Dracula story. And it's so weird that because this is a comedy that it's like, man, you really shouldn't. But yeah, this film, I feel like that's kind of also a flaw of the movie, because there's a lot of times in this movie where I was waiting for them to do something different, and then they stayed true to Dracula instead, but they just, you know, did a silly voice. But I just kept waiting. All right, when's that moment when you're gonna split off and do this thing? When's that moment when you're gonna do this thing? Because, you know, you think about like Blazing Saddles. That thing, yes, it was a Western, but man, they did weird stuff. That was a Looney Tunes cartoon, basically. This is very accurate to Dracula. And there's so many times in here where it feels like a punchline is being set up, but then they play it straight. Like, you only joined me for the last half hour of this film.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, the last half hour of this film is the best half hour of the movie. Up until that point, throughout the first hour of this film, I kept watching it just going, oh man, this really isn't that funny anymore. And then the last half hour comes in, and that's actually legitimately really good. But there's moments in there like when, not Lucy, is it Lucy or Mina? Which is the first one that gets bit?
I think it's Lucy.
Lucy is the first one that gets bit, yes. But when Lucy is bit, and she's in bed, she's so weak, they come and check on her, and they find the 2 bite marks, and they go, oh my goodness, what could have happened? And she goes, oh, I had a terrible dream. And then they say, a dream? What did you dream? I remember nothing. And it feels like that is a setup for a joke. It's like, I had a terrible dream. What was the dream? I remember nothing. One of you has to say something in response. One of you has to, but instead they just go, oh. Like a very concerned, oh my. And there's a lot of moments in here like that where it just feels like, okay, now comes the punchline. You got that setup, but they decide just to have that be the moment where they play it straight.
Yeah.
It is, yeah, it's kind of odd.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about the performances in here, I guess, because you can't really talk about the plot. I can't give you the plot description because, yes, it's literally Dracula. It starts off with Renfield, then it goes off. He ends up buying a castle. He finds Lucy and Mina and Harker, was that his name?
Harker?
It's something like that. He finds Steven Weber from Wings, which, by the way, it's so weird that this movie has not one, but 2 Wings alumni in here. Because the lady who also plays Mina was also on Wings. But Steven Weber plays the semi-protagonist. That's the thing about Dracula. Dracula has no protagonist. I guess if anybody, Dracula is really the protagonist because he's the only character that you stick with throughout the entire course of that book. But yeah, he's the hero? Question mark. So yeah, has the entire process in there. You got Van Helsing coming, which Van Helsing, played by Mel Brooks, perfect role for him to have in this film. If Mel Brooks was going to be anybody in this movie, he had to be Van Helsing. And yes, he comes in there, and I gotta say, even though this is not one of his funnier films, this is one of Mel Brooks' better performances. This is one of his better comedic, it's not a cameo because he has an entire role in here, but normally he is resigned to just being cameos in his films. This is probably some of the most screen time he's ever had in a film that he directed. And it was impressive. I honestly really enjoyed it. When we first cut to him, it's actually one of the best scenes in this film. This is one of those scenes that, listen, if you were going to make an entire montage of Mel Brooks' best moments, I wouldn't put this on like the short list, but if you had that montage be pretty long, yeah, this would be a scene that I would absolutely include in there. He is at a university and he is going to teach people, teach all of his students how to dissect a body. He says, "This is where we begin to separate the true doctors from the ones who just want to play around." And he says, "You might feel a little bit queasy," and he pulls back the sheet, and one person instantly fades. "Now we will take a razor and make an incision all the way up from the groin," passes out, up to the ribcage, another person passes out, and he just starts going one by one, just ripping out body parts until people keep falling over. And he goes, "Guess that's all of them." And then one little like weenie guy in the back goes, "You didn't get me, Professor." "Oh. All right then, let's examine the human brain," and cracks the guy's skull open, hands him the brain, goes, just shoves him over. And then the nurse comes in. "Oh, Dr. Helsing, a perfect 10 out of 10. I still got it." That's actually a really good scene in here. Yeah, this film, it doesn't all hold up, but there are scenes in here that definitely are worth checking out. But yeah, he is great in this film. But again, it's just so odd to me. There are times when he decides to play it straight in this movie. And I'm not saying everything in here had to be a gag, but there are so many times in here in which you're looking for someone to make a joke here. Anyone to make a joke. And you keep turning over to Mel Brooks because he's Mel freaking Brooks. And no, he's being all in on this. He is absolutely like, "No, we must stop the vampire, and here's the curse of it." But then there are other times in here which you don't know if it's supposed to be a joke or not. Like, he's asking the head of the castle, the head of this asylum that he's at, if he has books on vampires, and he's listing off all the different books on vampires. And I kept listening to them going, was that supposed to be funny? Like, is the joke that it's a name of a book, like it's a weird name? Because it's not weird enough to really be a joke, but you're sure listing a lot of names here. Okay. And that's one other weird thing about this film is that Mel Brooks, he is known for being a big believer in repetition is funny. Which it is. Repetition is funny. And Mel Brooks has displayed that beautifully throughout his entire career. I think he leans more into repetitive jokes in this film than I've seen in any other film he's done. But so many of them feel like they stop just one joke before it's about to get funny. Like, there's so many lines in here where it's like, okay, say this up, then they repeat it, then someone repeats it. Oh, now we're on to the next thing.
I feel like the physical comedy is a lot better in this than the... Like,
I'm talking about like things compared to the other ones, but yeah, physical comedy is actually pretty darn good in this thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of that kind of comes down to Renfield, who I haven't talked about yet, but Renfield, he's played by the guy who was working at the art gallery in Ghostbusters 2. I can't remember his name. But that guy, I am not exaggerating when I say this. I have seen many different Dracula films. This is hands down my favorite incarnation of Renfield. Renfield is great in this movie because he knows how to just play like a very weenie little man, just a very nervous little nerdy individual. But then the moment that he has to go into, yes, master, he goes all in on that. So he's comedic in both forms, but it's insane that he's playing such an exaggerated version of Renfield when he's just playing normal Renfield, and yet still he outdoes that when he is now like slave Renfield, when he is just mind-controlled Renfield. Like there's a sequence in there. It's another one of those sequences that I have to point at this thing and go, that is actually a great sequence in here. It is known from all the different versions of Renfield that, yes, he eats bugs. There's a moment in which he is at the asylum, and then he goes and he talks to the guy who is the head of the asylum, and he goes, "Yes, yes, sir. We just have to see if if you're stable enough to leave. It's just a standard interview that we have to do." He is playing this very over the top, like kind of gentleman, and then Renfield goes, "Oh yes, I'm sure that we will sell this all quickly." And they're at this big buffet, and he goes, "Yes, make sure that you take anything that you want in there. Just take anything." He looks around and he finds a beetle crawling. Just, ow! What was that? You just picked up something off the table there. Did I? Yes, I think it was a bug. Did you just shove a bug in your mouth? No, it was a raspberry. Raspberry? I don't see any raspberry. Oh, it was a raisin. It fell off the muffin there. Oh, okay then. And the spider starts crawling down. Did you just eat a spider? What? No, I didn't eat a spider. That's preposterous. I'm telling me I ate a spider. Yes, you did. You reached up and you grabbed something right out of the air. I swear I saw it. You're imagining things. And he sees a cricket on the ground. Oops, dropped my fork, and then dives under the table and comes up and he's got the leg hanging out of his mouth. And he's actually like fiddling around with it in his mouth while he's talking to make it look like it's moving. So it's a great bit of physical comedy in there as well, because he has to not only be talking, but has to be like maneuvering his tongue around in there as well. And yeah, just the guy's reaction to him. Yes, I can still see it poking out your mouth. The poor thing is fighting for his life right now. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's a great little sequence in here. And it's one of those things that you look at and go, that is a Mel Brooks sequence. That is something that absolutely stands up to the style of humor that we know from Mel Brooks stuff. However, speaking of some of the other humor in here that does not work, again, some of the repetitive stuff in here, the guy who is the head of the asylum, he keeps suggesting that they give everyone enemas. And that is a joke that keeps coming back again and again. I keep talking about how a lot of the repetitive stuff in here stops right before it feels like it's about to get funny. That one just keeps going and going and going, and it was never funny to me. Like, it feels like Mel Brooks just found out what an enema was, and he was like, that's hilarious. We have to put this in my movie now. Or Mel Brooks, he is a comedic genius, but he also kind of comes from that old school style of comedy where there's a lot of great things that he brought from old school comedy, slapstick comedy.
Yeah, vaudeville style.
Comedy. Yeah, he is one of those guys who kept vaudeville style comedy going for decades after everyone else stopped doing it. But he also brings back the funny words are funny, which I think that all of society has kind of moved past that. Like, yeah, if a funny word is funny, you can get like one good use out of it, and that's stretching it sometimes. He's still one of those guys who thinks, no, if a funny word is funny, we're going to keep that thing coming back around. And listen, kid, I know comedy. Enemas are funny. Believe me on this one. Come on, we're going to bring this thing back around. Yeah, that thing just never really got funny to me. The other characters in here, though. Leslie Nielsen, we have to talk about him as Dracula. It's so weird because Leslie Nielsen is a guy who has just played Leslie Nielsen in every movie he has ever done. Mm-hmm. At least every comedy he's ever done. Because that's one thing that people forget about Leslie Nielsen. He didn't used to be a comedic actor. He used to be a serious actor. And he used to also just play assholes. Like almost every role that he had before he was a comedian, he was a villain. Not like a straight up villain, but he was the asshole that the protagonist had to overcome. He was rarely ever the good guy. I mean, speaking of horror films, Creepshow. Before Naked Gun, he was this just sinister, malicious old man in Creepshow. It is weird that he did that for so long before he just fell deep into doing comedy. And he's got such a unique style of comedy. I remember he hosted Saturday Night Live decades ago. Before I even started watching Saturday Night Live, I caught it on a rerun like years and years and years after it came on. And during his opening monologue, he was explaining his sense of comedy. And he said that his sense of comedy is to just be a straight man. Mm-hmm. And he said, see, in a normal movie, you would deliver a line like this. And he delivered a line. And then he said, but you see, when I'm being comedic, I deliver it like this. And he delivered it in the exact same way. And I went, yeah, that's kind of what you do. And in this film, he is just being Leslie Nielsen again, but he's also being Dracula. Mm-hmm. And it's so weird that his portrayal is the perfect overlap of those two things. Like, me saying Leslie Nielsen is just being Leslie Nielsen here might sound like it's being an insult. It's not. Leslie Nielsen is great. But it is so weird that he is also, you look at him and go, yeah, that is what Leslie Nielsen being Dracula would 100% be like. Like, if I told you there is a film where Leslie Nielsen played Dracula, this is exactly what you would picture in your mind. Mm-hmm. No more, no less. That exact spot in that middle. And you know what? It's kind of fun. I liked it. I still, after all this time, even when he's not funny in this movie,
he's still entertaining.
Yes, exactly. He's still Leslie Nielsen. Leslie Nielsen will always be entertaining, even in a bad film, just because of what a unique individual he is. And yeah, I really did enjoy him throughout this film. He's one of those things that, even during that first hour where I was like, yeah, this isn't all that great, but Leslie Nielsen's pretty good. Renfield's giving me some good jokes in there, so it kept me going along. It wasn't until Mina ended up getting bitten in that last half hour that this film, like, it felt like it finally hit its mark. It finally was like going on all cylinders in there. Like there's another great vaudevillian sequence in there in which Mina is asleep in a room and the handmaiden is in there too, or the maid is in there as well. And Dracula is out in the courtyard and he's trying to use his hypnotic visions to control them. So he puts the maid to sleep and then he wakes up Mina. He goes, all right, now stand up. And then both Mina and the maid stand up. No, you sit down. Mina sits down. No, you stand. You sit. And he has to keep like telling them what to do over and over, and they keep like getting confused. I was talking earlier this week when we reviewed Transylvania 65000, how they kept trying to do like vaudevillian stuff where one person was trying to do one thing and another person was trying to do the same thing, and it was just painful and not funny at all. This is a great example of it actually done correctly. Like I mentioned in not Hotel Transylvania, but Transylvania 65000. I mentioned in there, which oddly enough, that was a film about being in a hotel in Transylvania. But I mentioned in that review that there was that moment where they're trying to do two things at once. And I went, this would only be funny if you got like 8 people doing this. And it was so impressive, all the different people trying to do different things at all the different times. Here, they come in, they do something with just 2 people trying to do the same thing at the same time. And it goes on for like a solid 2-3 minutes. It's funny the entire time. It's really darn good. But I think to me, the scene that still holds up the best in this film is the the stake through the heart scene. Mm-hmm. That scene is so over the top. And I remember loving it as a kid, and I kept thinking, I've probably blown this out of proportions. I'm sure it's not going to be as funny. I still laughed hysterically at that moment. That scene is so great. And part of it is because Steven Weber as Harkins, whatever his name is, partly because Steven Weber is such a straight man in here. His character in this film is the over-the-top, oh, my heavens, the Victorian era must be proper and prim. He has to go and drive the stake into Lucy's heart, and he's about to do it, and then Van Helsing, again, played by Mark Brooks, Vance! Then he runs over behind a pillar. Okay, now! And Weber is such a dope in here, he doesn't even think anything about it. Smashes the stake in. just blood everywhere all over him. Oh my God. Oh God, just wiping off him.
Then Mel Brooks comes out because it's like, it's not in, you gotta hit it harder. Like, it just runs back behind the wall.
It's so good. He goes, all right, I'm not doing that again. How much blood can she have left? All right, fine. Runs back behind her. Like even more blood, like going all over his face. Oh, heavens. Mel Brooks comes running back out again. She's almost dead. And the best line in the whole movie, she's dead enough. Just throws the stake down. Which again, I keep talking about repetition in here though, about how it feels like they keep stopping one joke too short. I still love this gag. I still think it's one of my favorite gags in any Mel Brooks film. It is done so well, the timing of it is done so perfectly. But rule of threes.
Yes.
The rule of threes, and he only did it twice. And it just felt like, oh, dude, one more would have I know it feels like it might have been overkill, but you could have done something clever with that last one.
Like have so much blood just constantly come out, and you just like,
or he it really hasn't. They jams in one last time, and nothing happens. And goes, oh, okay. And then it all just starts pouring into him. Then he comes out with the "she's almost dead" line. She's dead enough. Like that's still the line you need to go out on. But yeah, it's again that is still a great bit in here. But it just kind of backs up this thing I've been saying about the film that man, there's a lot of repetitive comedy in here, but it feels like you always stop one joke short of it being that perfect moment. Yeah, this film. If you have never seen this, it is good enough to be worth watching, especially if you are in the mood for a goofy parody film. If you are a big Mel Brooks fan and you've never seen this thing, I think it is absolutely worth checking out.
Yeah.
But if you're just looking for a great horror comedy, it doesn't hold up as I remember. Like I said, big asterisk there, big emphasis on the as I remember, because again, going back and looking at like the reviews of this thing wasn't loved when it came out. I think it is just
your nostalgia.
My nostalgia. I liked it when I was a kid because it was goofy. It was honestly one of my first exposures to Mel Brooks. And that's one of those things that Mel Brooks is such a genius that anything of his that you watch, you're going to love if it's the first thing you've seen by him. If you have no other Mel Brooks films to compare this to, yeah, it's going to be great Mel Brooks comedy in here. But still, there's enough good stuff in here that still holds up, I believe. There is enough stuff in here that I still believe it's worth checking out if you're in the mood for this. If you just want a horror comedy in general, it's not quite good enough. But if you specifically want slapstick, you want vaudeville, you want a parody film, you like Mel Brooks, you like Leslie Nielsen, it's worth checking out. It is absolutely worth checking out. Maybe not a buy, but a rent. I would say. But thank you guys for tuning in. We've only got one more day in Horror Comedy Week.
Yes.
Thank you. Good, because we're getting to that point where I'm running on fumes and I'm forgetting everything that I'm saying. But if you guys want to check that out, then come back tomorrow. And remember, next week is viewer request week, so any horror movies that you want me to watch, let me know that in the comments down below this video or on Twitter @Professor Thorgy. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and happy Halloween.
Bye.